to Unifier 9.13 integration. Today's presentation will be administered by Don McNatty and Lynn Tan. We have a couple of items we'd like to go over before we get started. All call-in phones are automatically muted in order to preserve the quality of the audio for all attendees. If anybody has any questions during the course of today's presentation, there is a questions box in your GoToWebinar. You can submit your questions, and time permitting, we will try and answer as many questions as possible. As part of our follow-up procedures, all registrants and attendees of today's webinar will receive a link to the slideshow presentation, a recording of the webinar to share with colleagues, and also a question and answers log for all questions that are submitted either during the presentation or after the presentation. We will answer all those questions and forward it to everybody who registered and attended today's webinar. We're going to get started with our presentation part, and we're going to give the controls over to Don McNatty.
Good morning and welcome to our Unifier technical webinar. The purpose of this webinar is to kind of provide training and provide some technical perspective on things that we're working on that you're going to work on as well. Our agenda today is I'm going to give you an overview of P6 and Unifier, at least our perspective of how they can work well together. We'll talk about the fundamentals of the current integration with the current releases of the software. We'll show you how it works. We're going to run through some screens on the Unifier and the EPPM setup. I wanted those in the slides so that you've got a printed record of what they are. We actually took them from an Oracle presentation. They're kind of generic. And then Lyn's actually going to go into P6 EPPM and into Unifier, working out of our hosted data center, and actually give you an online hands-on demonstration of how it works. We'll talk about the integration issues, our observations on it, what we had to do to make it work, and then we should have some time to go over some questions. This is part of a series of webinars on Unifier. We've been working with Unifier since early this year. We've invested quite a bit into getting our staff up to speed on it. We have several deployments of it in our data center, and we use those for testing conversions and for working with the kinds of things that we need to do when clients implement Unifier. This month we're going to focus on the cost and schedule integration. Here's P6 in Unifier. This is a graphic provided by Oracle. It gives us some sense of their vision, where we're using Unifier to manage the costs with all of the backup documentation and audit trail, and then we're using P6 to manage the schedule. And of course, for that to work, they need to integrate, and that is what this presentation is all about. Just very briefly, for those of you that haven't been on any previous Unifier webinars, I'll just run a couple slides to talk about what is Unifier. It's cloud-based, which means it runs through a browser. It is available either in a SaaS model or a self-deployed or hosted environment, depending on how you want to do it. It is a business process, workflow-driven environment for tracking a lot of different types of project information. The workflows can be defined by you. They help control the security, who has access to what, and it helps to control the audit trail. There's a user interface which is configurable, where you can add fields. You can set up the security in the fields. It's a pretty intuitive interface that comes with the workflows. If you wanted a more customized user interface, you can using web services. The benefits are you've got real-time visibility of project information, so costs, documents, what's going on, easy to do forecasts because you have easier access to the information. Business processes are automated so that as one person finishes one step of a process, it can automatically go to whoever is next in line, whether it's being copied or whether I have approval. There's specific access levels to the information right down to the field level that you can control who has access to see what. And the biggest benefit that I see out of Unifier is it's got an audit trail that our clients have asked for years out of the Primavera products, and it does an excellent job on the audit trail. The Unifier package that we're talking about today is part of the Capital Project and Program Management, or CPPM package, which differs from the Real Estate and Facilities Management package. Today we're going to focus on the Unifier Cost Controls module. The Cost Control module lets you track budgets, forecasts, commitments, changes, spends, whatever you want to call it. I could track multiple iterations of estimates, store them in their own column with their own backup information, business processes to get them in, all of the backup documentation attached through comprehensive workflows that will support any kind of business process that you need to do. So the cost management is very configurable, can support unique processes, no limitations on what you want to do with cost codes. And you integrate that into the way you do business with these automated workflows for routing, revising, and approving. So what happens is in the part here where there's actually dollars on the cost sheet, okay, behind that are a series of steps, documents, attachments that drive that happening. Go on to, okay. Here's kind of an interactive example of how it works. You've got the document folder. You define this. You can upload directly, or you can use business processes to populate it. You define the workflows. Workflows will drive what goes into the cost sheet. It can generate original documents. You can create a schedule in Unifier, or as we're going to do in this presentation, bring the schedule information into Unifier, and the cost sheet information, the schedule sheet information drives the cash flows that we're able to produce within Unifier. I did this graph here. Our goal is to align a project. Let me turn off that. Okay. What I want to do is, we started out by aligning a P6 project with a project in Unifier. So I would have all my projects in Unifier, and I would then link them to a P6 project. A project in Unifier, if I've got two projects in Unifier, each one could be linked to a different P6 database if that's what I needed to do. So I've got that flexibility, okay? The costs are maintained in Unifier through business processes and cost codes, which they refer to as the WBS, but which in the integration they're referring to from P6 as the CBS, or the cost breakdown structure. Once I link the two, I then can look at the cost breakdown structure code in P6. I can align it with activities. When I do that, all I'm seeing is cost breakdown structure. It's not bringing over, I'm not bringing over any cost. All I can see is the cost code, and then based on that link, I can send back to Unifier activity information, dates, durations, percent completes. I can also send costs and logic, and there might be a reason why I want to send P6 costs into Unifier. For instance, very early on in a project, my costs might originate in P6, and I want to capture that initial project budget in Unifier so I can send it back and store it in its own unique column within Unifier. Okay, so this is the concept of what we're trying to do. Why do we want to do it? Well, P6 is not a cost tool. And over the years, many people have tried to use it as a cost tool, but it's really designed as a scheduling tool, and it has to be kind of force-fit into managing costs. With Unifier, we have something that is designed from the beginning to manage costs. So I can establish and control all of my project costs. I can manage funding, various estimates, budgets, commitments, changes, my payments, track my spending. All of this can be done in Unifier, and then I can link to a project schedule and monitor progress, which then allows me to report on all aspects of the project from a cost and schedule perspective, and manage all of the documents behind the costs within Unifier. And again, it gives me a great audit trail that we've been wanting for years. So here's the integration process. The blue boxes are Unifier, the red boxes are P6. So first we set up Unifier to connect to P6. And then we go into P6 EPPM. The connection has to be done through EPPM. Once it's done in EPPM, I can see it from P6 Pro, but I cannot set up the initial connection through Pro. I then link my activities to the cost breakdown structure, which could be done in EPPM or P6 Pro, and then I send that information to Unifier, where I can do Unifier reports. And this is the process that Lim's going to go through when he shows you the software demo. So the Unifier setup, the first box, you need to create cost sheets, and you need to populate them with costs. Then you create a schedule sheet that's going to receive the dates from P6. Create cash flows. I might want to do a cash flow for a budget and commitment, so I need to do two different cash flow profiles. Set up my default budget and progressing methods, my data mapping to activities, data mapping to resources in P6 if I do want to bring over any costs or units, and I've got some data mapping options I have to set up. These are some of the screens that Lim's going to take you through. I really just wanted to kind of have them documented here in the slides so that you have something to reference when you use these slides to try and do it yourself. So the budget and progress defaults are defined, and this is what's defined in what Oracle calls the base product or the prepackaged solutions. We originally called it out of the box, but they've changed it to be referred to as the base product, and so that's what we're showing you here. So within Unifier, we define the mapping of the P6 data to Unifier. Lim will talk about this a little bit more. I can add fields to it, but not all fields are supported. For instance, I can get the cost fields from P6 resources, but I do not have access to the P6 expenses. I can add additional fields that I want to map to. Here I've got the cost and resource fields have been added. On the P6 EPPM side, we need to set up first application settings. Then you have to create your project schedule. You set up your project preferences. You then link the Unifier cost breakdown structure code to activities. And a single cost breakdown structure can be linked to multiple activities. And when the dates go over, it takes the earliest early start and the latest early finish is the dates that go over. I cannot link multiple cost breakdown structure codes to a single activity. If you need to do that, then you're going to have to go down to a lower level of detail on your activities so that you can have a one-to-one relationship between an activity and a cost breakdown structure. So then we send the information to Unifier either from the project screen or the activity screen in P6. So setting up the application settings is pretty straightforward. And again, Lim will show you going into administrator, application settings, general, and here's where you define your URLs for your Primavera Unifier URL. And there's some information that you need from Unifier in order to set this up. It's not going to look it up for you. You have to know what it is. Lim will cover that. Next, you select the project. This is under project preferences. So I have a single project in P6 that's being linked to a single project in Unifier, and you tell it which schedule sheet to go to, which data mapping to go to. Once that link's done, then you'll be able to add a column in your layout for the cost breakdown structure. So this column can only be seen from the layout. And then you can go do a pick list here and select the cost account that you want to associate with the activity. Okay, now I'm not going to see any Unifier costs here. It doesn't display them. It doesn't import them. All I'm doing here is just providing a link from a single activity to a single cost code. And if multiple activities go to the same cost code, then the dates that go over are the earliest early start and the latest early finish. Once that linking's done, then I can send the information to Unifier from the project or EPS screen. I can go into Actions, and under Import Export, I have a Send to Unifier capability there, which I can also access directly from an activity layout. And so what this will do is send this information to my Unifier database. So Lim's going to walk through the demonstration. Lim, I know I had told you that the earliest you might get this turned over to you was about 25 minutes after, but I've tried to go through this fairly quickly so that you've got more than enough time to show everything that you need to show. So if you would like.
Thank you, Don.
Lim?
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Don.
All right.
So I will be demonstrating what the setup procedures are to send P6 data over to Unifier using the P6 Unifier integration feature, and how I'm going to utilize the P6 dates that have been sent over to be used in cash flow curves. As you can see, I have my Unifier environment displayed. First thing that is needed is obviously the schedule sheet for the project, for the Unifier project. By default, using the base product schedule manager, the project schedule sheet will already be set up. I'm just going to open up the schedule sheet now. As you can see, it's blank. Just to quickly show you what Don had mentioned, we have the budget and progress set up if you were to use the schedule sheet functionality. You have the activity budget distribution profile, which has been kept at linear, percent complete and earned progress, percent complete calculation method if you were utilizing that, as well as percent earned calculation method. The way in which we would get the data over from P6 into Unifier would utilize data mapping. I'm just going to bring that up now. This data mapping had already been set up as part of the base product. I'm just going to open it up, and you'll see 4 tabs. We have the General tab, we have the Activity tab. Now this is the way in which the fields from the P6 schedule are mapped to the fields in the Unifier schedule sheet. So the first column shows all the Unifier fields or data elements that we'll be using that have been selected here. The second column, CVS header, is if you were to use the manual import process. So these would be the heading names that you would set up. And most importantly for us, the third column, which is the XML elements. These XML elements, they're the names of the elements that are in the Primavera XML that is from the P6 schedule. These are the default ones that have been set up, but if you wanted to include more, you would simply click the Add button. You can see we have 3 rows. We have the first one, which is the column. So this is for the Unifier fields or data elements. This is the availability list of the elements that we can create the mappings for. You would add in your CSV header if you were to do a CSV manual import. And again, the more important one for us, because we're taking the information from P6, we need to get the name of the P6 XML element, and you would enter it here. So this is for the activity information from the P6 schedule. If you were to assign resources, and obviously those resources would have units and cost, you would look at the Resources tab. The base product has the 4 P6 cost, quantity, which is your units, resource name and resource type. You can see that we don't have the CSV column. The support for resource assignments is only utilizing the Primavera XML. Again, if you wanted to include additional mappings for the resource assignments, you simply click the Add button, and these are the additional columns you have from the Unifier schedule sheet to do with the resource assignment. And obviously you would have to find and enter the associated Primavera XML element from the P6 schedule sheet. Lastly, and probably most importantly, is the Options tab, which actually defines the XML import and export options. The most important one for us for this demonstration is utilizing and checking the WBS codes checkbox in the import section. This WBS codes is actually the Unifier cost codes. They're still using the name WBS codes. It's not the P6 WBS codes. So that refers to the cost breakdown structure that is within Unifier. Okay. So the mapping has already been set up. And I'm now going to show you the cost sheet. This is for the same project. I'm just going to open it. We've already set up some cost codes, the cost breakdown structure. You can see that we've already populated via the cost business processes, original budget, approved budget revisions, the revised budget, original commitments, revised commitments. So we already have a populated cost sheet. And we're going to be utilizing the cost codes from this cost sheet in P6. One thing I should add is that in order for us to make the integration link between P6 and Unifier, you would need three bits of information. One is the URL, which is basically the URL that you would use to log into Unifier. The other is the short name, and lastly is the authentication code. I'm just going to show you that now. I'm just going to go to the company workspace, which we have named Acme Construction. I'm going to go into administration mode. I'm going to click open. Taking a little bit of time to come up, but here we go. So, as I said, we needed the URL, which we know, which is the URL to log into Unifier. We have the short name. In this case, it is Acme. This is what we need. And lastly is the authentication code, which is here is called the authentication key. The key is already actually populated. By default, it basically is not visible once you've entered it, but the authentication key has already been entered. So with those three pieces of information, we can use that in P6 and set up the P6 Unifier integration link. I'm now going to go to P6 Web. Okay. One thing worth mentioning is I'm going to be connecting to our P6 EPPM database, the demo database. You can also connect to the same Unifier environment another P6 EPPM database. So I actually have two databases here. I can connect both of them to the same Unifier environment. So with different schedules from two different databases, I can still bring them into the one Unifier environment. For the demonstration, I'm using the demo database. I'm just going to log in now. From the Administer menu, I'm going to go to Application Settings. I'm now going to go to the General section, and you can see on the right-hand side we have a Primavera Unifier subsection. So as I said before, we need the URL. So this is my URL to my Unifier environment. We're utilizing the short name, here the company short name, Acme, and we have the authentication key in P6. It is called the authentication code, and we have that entered. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the P6 project that we have set up for the demonstration. So we now have the P6 Unifier integration link set up through the application settings. We now need to actually make the association between the Unifier project and the P6 schedule that we have here. This can be done under the EPS screen. I'm just going to go to the project in question. Here we have our P6 project, the Allentown new hotel construction. We would go to the Actions menu. We would go to Set Project Preferences. Okay, the project preferences is displayed, and we're going to go to the Primavera Unifier section. As Don had mentioned, we need the associations are set up here. So we have checked link project to a Primavera Unifier project. Once that is checked, you will get the option to be able to select the project that you want from Unifier. I'm just going to select it now. You can see the window has popped up. This shows all the projects that are in Unifier that are available for me to associate with this P6 schedule. We've already associated this one, so I'm just going to close. I'm just going to open up the schedule sheet window. You can have multiple Unifier schedule sheets within a project. In this case, we only have the one, but you can have multiples, and in which case you can select the appropriate one. Once you've selected the Unifier schedule sheet, obviously you want to select the appropriate data mapping. We had already set up the default one. Again, you can have multiple different types of data mappings based on what is appropriate and to what you want to bring over. Just going to open up the window to show you that you can see the P6 integration data mapping that we have already selected. We have two other options in this window, in the screen rather. You can check delete activities no longer in the P6 schedule from Primavera Unifier. You could also check only send activities with CBS codes assigned. Okay, so we now have that association between the P6 schedule and the Unifier schedule sheet. I'm just now going to go straight to the activity screen. Okay. As you can see, it's a very simple schedule. The key thing to note here is we have a CBS column. I'm just going to select on the first activity, and I'm just going to double click to open up the CBS window. As we know, the association has been made. Now when we see the CBS window, we can see all the cost breakdown structure, the cost codes that are from that Unifier project cost sheet. In this case, you can see that we've already set up the specific cost code associated with the activity. So we've got the schedule sheet ready. We obviously now want to push the data into Unifier. So as Don had mentioned, you could do it from the EPS screen. I'm going to show you from this activity screen. You would merely go to the Actions menu, Import Export submenu item, and select Send to Primavera Unifier. Remember, we had the blank schedule sheet in Unifier. I'm now going to push our P6 data to that Unifier schedule sheet. I'm just going to select it now. We will be getting a confirmation window. You can see it now. What I like to do is just confirm that the pushing of data was successful. You can do that by again going to the Actions menu, selecting View Service Status. So I've just opened it. You can see I've done several, but the top one is the one that we have just pushed data, and you can see that has been completed, so it's successful. If you wanted to see a little bit more information, you can by opening up the details screen. So the data has now been pushed into Unifier. So I'm going to switch back to our Unifier environment. I'm going to locate the Unifier project, which is in the Philadelphia tab. This is the Allentown new hotel construction. I will double click. This will open it up. I'll now go to the Schedule Manager, select the schedule sheet, and this is the schedule sheet that I had shown you earlier. And you can see we have the data from the P6 schedule. It's worth pointing out, or rather just highlighting, to see further information on the activity, you would select the activity record. And you can see here we have some of the information that we had pushed from the P6 schedule. You have the WBS code, rather the cost codes that were associated to those activities, and they'll be listed here. If you were to assign resources to the activities, they would be displayed in this tab. So we have our P6 schedule data in Unifier. You can see that we have the start dates and the finish dates. They're the key information that we want to use now when we're creating our cash flow curves. So I'm going to go now to the cost manager. I'm going to go to cash flow. And I'm going to select this. We've already set this up, the project budget cash flow. you can see that it's empty. I'm now going to actually put the curves in so we can see the information. If I go to Properties, and now I'm going to go to Curves. You can see here actually, sorry, just going back to the General tab, we are looking at the WBS detail level, i.e. the cost code level. So in this section I want to add my curves in. So first of all, we want to bring we need to get the dates from the Unifier schedule. So what we would do, I have a curve called P6 budget cash flow. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the data, i.e. the dates from the Unifier schedule sheet. So I'm selecting in the distribution, use data from schedule sheet, and I'm going to select the sheet that we have data populated. By default, it already disables the cost section and the schedule section of this curve. I'm going to OK this. Now, what we wanted to do is we wanted to use the dates that we got from the P6 schedule and to use those dates against cost data from the Unifier cost sheet. So by default, Unifier doesn't have that support yet, but we have a way of being able to get that working. I'm going to create a new curve. This one's the budget cash flow. Now this time what I'm going to do is with the distribution, I'm going to set a default profile, so that's a distribution profile. I'm using the bulk edit functionality. I'm going to use the linear distribution profile. Just to mention, these four are the default ones from the base product. You can add any other types of distribution profiles you want. These are the ones that have already been set up. We're just going to use the linear one. Just going to repeat that. There you go. So now all the cost codes have a specific distribution profile. I'm just going to save that. So now we want to utilize cost sheet data. So in the cost section, I'm selecting distribute amount from cost sheet column. You know that we had data already in there. I can now select from this list. I'm actually going to choose the budget, so I'm going to select the revised budget column. I'm going to leave the schedule section as is manual. I'm also going to create another cash flow curve, but based on another cost sheet column. I'm going to be looking at the commitments data. So again, distribution, I'm going to set a distribution profile for all the cost codes, utilizing the bulk edit functionality, selecting linear, save that. And with this curve, I'm actually going to select Revise Commitments. So I just want to check something very quickly, just double checking that we do have the default profiles with the other curve. Okay, so now I have 3 curves set up. Okay, we're really disregarding this first cash flow curve. This is for us to be able to get the P6 dates from the schedule sheet. If I just open it up, you can see for all the cost codes, we've brought over the P6 dates. It's worth mentioning again that these dates is the earliest start date and the latest finish date for all activities that have this the specific cost code. What we would do now is I would export the data from this curve. Just going to save it. And I'm just going to show you what the exported data is. Again, the key thing that we're getting from this curve information is the dates. Just to be 100% sure, I'm just going to clear out the content from the other columns. I'm just going to save it. I'm going to close this window. Now I'm going to put the dates into the other 2 curves so we get the distribution. You can see here for the cost codes we have the default profiles, which is linear. We have the total column. So this is from the revised budget column in the Unifier cost sheet. You can see though that the distribution hasn't been allocated because we haven't got any dates. So I'm going to put the dates in. So I'm going to select import. I'm going to go to curve setup. I'm going to browse to the CSV file that I had modified slightly. And I'm going to click OK. And you can now see the dates have been imported in to this revised budget cash flow curve. And you can now see the amounts have been distributed accordingly. So there you have it. So this is the cash flow curve utilizing the P6 dates, but using the revised budget data from the Unifier cost sheet. As you remember, I also set up another curve to look at the revised commitments, and I'm going to repeat the process to get the dates in and get the distribution. select import. I'm going to go to curve setup. Click browse. Select my CSV file. And I click OK. Once again, you can see the dates have been pulled in and the amounts have been distributed accordingly based on the linear profile and the amounts from the revised commitments data from the Unifier cost sheet. I'm just going to close this window now. Taking a little bit of time, but here we go. Okay, and there you have it. So we have our two curves that we can now compare utilizing the same P6 dates, but looking at one curve looking at the revised budget data that we have from the cost sheet, and the other curve looking at the revised commitments, again from the cost sheet. If the dates were to change from P6, you would repeat the whole process again. So from P6, you would push the data into the Unifier schedule. All you would need to do at this point is merely just click refresh, and this will pull in new dates. The change dates from the Unifier schedule sheet that have been pushed from P6, and then repeat the export process of the dates and import them into the curves again. You can also set up, other curves. We've just shown you for this demonstration the curve for revised budget and for revised commitments. This concludes the demonstration. Thank you, and back over to you, Don. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lim. As you can see, there's two curves on this. Now, it wasn't quite as automated as we would have liked it to have been, but we were able to get around that fairly easily. This is the first pass at the integration by Primavera. This is the built-in. There's also other ways of doing integration with schedule using CSV files, which requires more manual data mapping. It also supports direct import of MPP files and XML files. So there are some other optional ways to go that would allow you to do other fields. May allow us to pull the dates directly into those specific cash flow profiles, but it would take some programming work to do that, and we wanted to stick with what was in the out-of-the-box profile on this particular presentation. Okay, so in this setup, we pushed information from P6 Web. It's an EPPM database. There was a question about whether you could hook it up in Pro, and no, it has to be an EPPM database to do the link, but then P6 Pro could be linked to the P6 EPPM database and do the push from there. But the initial setup has to be in an EPPM database. Okay, it does not import costs to P6. You only get to associate an activity with a CBS code. You can send more information than what we sent. There was a question about being able to send baseline information, And yes, that could have been added to the data mapping. There were quite a few more fields that you could probably have seen as Lim scrolled down through some of those screens. And so we just stuck with some basics there. So we used a simple export-import technique to get the P6 dates aligned with specific Unifier cost columns. You know, when he selected the revised budget and the revised commitment, there was probably 20-some columns. I mean, those could have been original estimate, 30% estimate. There's really no limit to the kinds of costs that you can track within Unifier, driven by business processes with attached documents and audit trail. And so that's really the focus of what we think is important in managing the costs in Unifier and the schedule in P6. Next month we're going to talk about web services integration, and we're going to try and take a closer look at maybe using the XML files and do some of this in an automated way with web services and not using just the out-of-the-box or the base package functionality. There was a question about being able to do it from P6 Pro, so I inserted this slide here where I can see a P6 Pro screen. I can see the CBS column, the lookup, and I can also do the send to Unifier from P6 Pro. We do have a few questions. There's a question on how robust the schedule manager is in Unifier, and my opinion is it's very basic. If you're going to do any serious scheduling, excuse me, then you need to be using a tool like P6, Microsoft Project. You could also use other scheduling tools and then use the CSV format for bringing in scheduled dates. So I could use a serious scheduling tool, which I don't consider Unifier to be. How would Unifier work in an organization where costs and financials are in SAP? Well, you've got a couple choices. You know, the first is that you could bring your SAP data into the Unifier data in a separate column and be able to do comparisons on that. And when we answer these questions, I'll also send you a link to something that we just did for a customer that had that specific problem. They didn't want to import the SAP data into P6. They weren't using Unifier, so we gave them another way of doing it that was pretty creative. We'll send you some information on that with a list of answers to the question. There was a question about early start, early finish for integration. What if an activity has a constraint? Unifier doesn't really care, just looks at the start and the finish dates, takes the earliest and latest ones, that's what it has, doesn't really care whether you have a constraint or not. Another question was, how do I know what the authentication key is if it's invisible? I'll leave that one for Lim in a minute. There was another question that was good. Two databases, is there a conflict? Well, there's not a conflict if you use your head when you organize it. If I have Project A and B in Unifier, and Project A is in one P6 database and Project B is in another P6 database, I can link the separate the separate Unifier projects to separate P6 databases. You would never want to have the same schedule in different databases trying to integrate it. Okay, that kind of integration ends up biting you because you maybe didn't plan it well enough. Will the integration work with a non-web database? I said no. It has to be EPPM for the initial hookup. So we'll be taking any additional questions, putting them into a file with some links to other follow-up information that might help you on this. I want to thank everybody that attended this and also wanted to make note of some upcoming events for those of you really into the cost, schedule, risk, claims markets. The CPM conference in Orlando, January 21st through 24th. We're going to be there. We're teaming with Critical Business Analysis out of Ohio to set up a kind of a help desk for Primavera-related, P6-related questions. So we will be there. The AACE's Western Winter Workshop is in North Lake Tahoe in March 13th through 16th. We suggest you, if you're in California close by, that's always a great conference. And brand new this year is it's the first Northeast Total Cost Management Symposium. Our Buffalo office has been working closely with AACE to put on a Western Winter Workshop type of an event with AACE. This one will be in Philadelphia in the third week of March. So if you're on the East Coast, hope you can make it there. And then don't forget Collaborate, which is essentially the Primavera Users Conference. Collaborate's a pretty big event, but Primavera does have its own portion of Collaborate for Primavera related tools. So hopefully you can make that in April in Las Vegas. So for those of you that are not getting our Loop newsletter, which just went out yesterday or the day before, you can always subscribe to it by going to our website. Any questions, any suggestions about future webinars, please feel free to email us about that. So thank you very much.